1. Will the defendant take the stand, said the DA. Mr. Simpson.
Well, that's a violation of the rules of criminal procedure and also, I believe, of the Constitution for any man to be compelled to be a witness against himself.
Well, I don't quite see that there's he's asking the witness
The district attorney would not say that.
Why not?
Well, you wouldn't.
Why not?
Wallace.
He wouldn't say it because if the defendant is privileged to remain mute, and if anybody comments on his failure to take the stand, it would constitute a grave judicial error.
That's right. Now, here's another. The people of the state of New York charged the defendant with shooting the deceased in the New York Customs House on July 15, 1940. Mr. Simpson.
That would be a federal offense triable under in the United States District Court of the Southern District of New York, prosecuted by the United States Attorney rather than the District Attorney of New York County.
That's 100% right. Thank you very much, Mr. Simpson. Mr. Kieran, what were you going to say?
Oh, you say the same thing in fewer words.
Thereby constituting a record.
Every profession is a conspiracy against the laity, and this is the revolt of the laity.
Yes, and they're doing pretty well, too. Now, how about this one? The defendant's alibi was that he was left-handed and could not have fired the shot. What's wrong with that? Judge Wallace.
An alibi is a defense in which the defendant says he's someplace else other than at the scene of the crime.
Yes, it's a constantly misused word, isn't it? What does alibi mean?
Elsewhere.
Elsewhere, that's right. It's a word we constantly misuse. 3 out of 3, gentlemen. That sends us on to this question from B. Steiner of this city. Get 2 out of 3. This is one about bandits. Can you name, first, the blue-eyed banditti? The blue-eyed banditti. Mr. Kieran.
That's Longfellow's children.
I wonder whether they were his children or whether they were his nieces. I'm not sure.
Daughters.
Were they his daughters?
Well,
I guess that's
daughters
children.
are children
I
where I
think
live.
so. Yeah.
Brave,
Can you name them?
Brave Alice and Laughing Allegra and Edith with golden hair.
That's right, yes. From the Children's Hour. Thank you, Mr. Kieran. Thank you, Mr. Adams. Now, who was the boy bandit? The boy bandit. Judge Wallace.
Lawrence Bonney, I think, was the boy bandit.
I wouldn't know. I don't think he was called that.
He
may have been a bandit. He may have been a boy.
Bandit.
Can you think of any other? Mr. Kieran?
Wasn't a fellow named Floyd?
Pretty Boy Floyd.
Pretty Boy Floyd?
I don't know whether he was called a boy bandit. I don't think so. No, it was Jimmy Johnston, the prize fight promoter and manager. Wasn't he called a boy bandit, Mr. Kieran?
Never by me.
Well, you're politer when you write than when you're on information, please,
Lawrence
Mr.
Bonney
Kieran.
was a boy bandit, a real boy bandit.
You stick to that?
I stick to that.
All right, we'll let him in. How about the bobbed hair bandit? Mr. Adams.
Cecilia Cooney.
Right. Who was she?
She was, she was the bobbed-haired bandit.
That all I wanted to know.
Who later went to Auburn prison.
Yes, and I believe was paroled in 1931, just to get the story absolutely straight. Now, how about this one from R.H. Merritt of South Pasadena, California? Get 2 out of 3, gentlemen, if you can. Identify the girl in an old-time play who did the following things. The first girl swung from a bell clapper. An old-time play, this is. Judge Wallace.
That's the, you mean Leslie Carter, the one that did it in the play?
What's the play called?
The Heart of Maryland.
Yes, and who was the girl?
Mrs. Leslie Carter was the girl.
Yes, and what was she called in the play? Well, I hate to do that. Her name was Maryland.
I remember Maurice Barrymore played in that show. He was the leading man.
It was the Heart of Maryland, and the name of the heroine was Maryland. And she hung on to the iron tongue of the bell to prevent the clanging, which would reveal the escape of her sweetheart. Now, what girl in an old-time play was dressed as a jockey and won a race? Judge Wallace?
You mean the actual girl, Madge Lessing?
Gee, you do know. That's right. In what play?
In Old Kentucky.
In Old Kentucky, yes, that's right. That's pretty good. Pretty good. You must have had a very interesting childhood, Judge.
I still have a lot of fun.
Can you identify the girl, finally, in an old play who was buried alive? Who was buried alive? This is really the easiest one. This is really the easiest one. My, Mr. Kieran, I'm ashamed of you. Mr. Simpson.
Wasn't Juliet?
You bet.
In Romeo and Juliet
yes,
by
Juliet and Romeo and Juliet.
W. Shakespeare.
By W. Shakespeare.
You call that an old-time play?
Well, it's pretty old.
No, that's where he deceived me. I don't go for the classics.
That's modern?
Well, compared to the memory of Judge Wallace, I suppose it's kind of modern, but...
That's ageless.
That gives us 3 out of 3. Now, here's another political question, gentlemen, coming from Ann Calco of Jamestown, New York. All of the unsuccessful major party candidates for the presidency of the last 7 presidential elections are living, which proves that if you are interested in longevity, all you have to do is be defeated for president. Can you name all of them? There are 7. They're all living. Now, we can all work together on this.
One person has to name all?
Have to name all. Mr. Adams?
One person has to?
No, the 4 of you. Mr. Adams, go ahead.
Well, Herbert Hoover.
Herbert Hoover, that's right. That gives
Alfred
us
E. Smith.
Alfred E. Smith, thank you very much. That gives us 2. Gentlemen, Mr. Kieran.
Mr. Cox.
Yes, James M. Cox, that's 3. Mr. Simpson.
Alf Landon.
Alfred, we call him. Alfred.
Alf M. Landon and
yes.
Wendell Wilkie.
And Wendell Wilkie. Now, that gives us 2 to go. We've got 5. Mr. Adams?
John W. Davis.
John W. Davis is quite right in 1924, Judge Wallace, and that gives us 1 to go.
James M. Cox.
We've already had James.
We've had Mr. Cox. 1 more. A presidential candidate who now occupies a position of great eminence indeed.
Charles E. Hughes.
That's right. That gives us 7 out of 7, gentlemen. Thank you very much indeed. Mrs. C.A. Page of Princeton, New Jersey, sends this one in. What is the last name of the feminine half of each of these famous pairs? Get 3 out of 4. John Alden and Priscilla. Mr. Adams?
Mullins.
Mullins, yes. Why should anybody remember that, Mr. Adams?
Well, that's Delia's name.
Lady up in your house who helps you?
Yes.
That's right. George and Eliza. George and Eliza.
It's
Adams.
in Uncle Tom's Cabin.
It is in Uncle Tom's
Harris.
Cabin. Harris. Very good, Mr. Adams. That's swell. How about the following? Gabriel La Jeunesse and Evangeline. Mr. Adams.
Bellafontaine.
Say, last name Adams we're going to call him. He's marvelous.
Call him Mullins Food Adams.
How about Peter and Wendy? Peter and Wendy. From what book, gentlemen?
Peter Pan.
That's right, Judge Wallace. What are the last names? They have the same last name. Yes, that's how you can get it. Think of the father's name, and that's a good way of getting the children's name.
Let me think.
Darling. Darling is the... excuse me, Judge, that's the name I was giving you. Darling. That's what's written on the
wondered.
card. 3 out of 4 is good enough, gentlemen. How about this one? This comes from Miss Ann Honeycutt of New York. And it's a 3-part political question again, yet 2 parts out of 3. Here's the first part. Which party gained representatives in the House at the last election, and how many? Mr. Simpson.
The Democratic Party.
Don't, yes, Democratic Party. Just say it good-naturedly, Mr. Simpson.
Well, they gained about half a dozen members of the House.
Didn't mean anything.
About half a dozen is what?
I say about 8.
Yes, that's a half a dozen in Republican parlance. That's right.
When you're counting Democrats.
8 is right.
Only worth half a dozen Republicans.
Now, Mr. Simpson, we'll give you a chance. Which party gained in the Senate and how much? Which party gained in the Senate and how much,
The
gentlemen?
Republicans.
Thank you,
gained
Judge Wallace.
Senate.
The Republicans gained it how many?
How many did they get now?
Well, I guess it's what the Republicans would call about half a dozen.
My guess
3,
would be...
I think.
What would you say, Mr. Adams?
I think it was 4 or 5.
Choose.
4.
4 is right. Good. That's right. Republicans gained 4. The Democrats lost 3. Now, gentlemen, in which presidential election did President Roosevelt receive the largest popular vote? In which presidential election? Judge Wallace.
In 1936.
In 1936. You couldn't give us the figures out of that capacious mind of yours, could you, Judge?
I'm not very good on figures.
Mr. Simpson.
About 25 million.
In 36?
Yes.
27,400,000. Be fair. Be fair. That's right.
That's the rule of diminishing returns, a la Simpson.
27,400,000. Well, gentlemen, you were very good on that one. See if you can do as well on this. This comes from Mrs. Hollis McMillan of Oakland, California. Get 2 out of 3. Now, I have 3 phrases, 3 famous quotations. And they all begin, well, you'll see how they begin when I read them to you. Who wrote or said them? Unwept, unhonored, and unsung. Mr. Kieran.
Walter Scott.
Yes, Walter
Down
Scott.
to the depths from which he sprung, unwept, unhonored, and unsung.
Quartet again. That's right. From what poem, Mr. Kieran?
The Lay of the Last
The
Minstrel.
Lay of the Last Minstrel. Yes, a very famous quotation. And how about this one, which is much harder? Unhouselled, disappointed, unannealed. Mr. Kieran had his hand up at once.
That's Shakespeare. That's Hamlet, speaking of the way in which his father was dispatched by his traitorous uncle.
Very good. And what do the words mean? Unhouselled, disappointed, unannealed, Mr.
Stockings
Kieran.
were down.
Well, it meant that he was totally unprepared for death. He was unshriven
That's
and
correct.
all the rest of it.
Yes, that's right. Not given extreme unction or any of the sacraments. How about this? undefeated, untied, unscored upon, and uninvited. Mr. Kieran again.
That was the Colgate football team of a few years ago.
What does it refer to?
They were not invited to the Rose Bowl after having made that fine record.
That's right. Who was the coach then?
Handy Andy Kerr.
Good enough, Mr. Kieran. That's very good. The next one from Barbara Mathis of Budbrook, New Jersey. What animals frequently appear in pictures by Giorgio de Chirico? What animals? Mr. Simpson.
Horses.
Good. Henri Julien Rousseau. What animals appear? Mr. Kieran.
Well, tigers and lions and any kind of tropical animals, but the larger mammals, preferably.
Yes, monkeys, tigers. And finally, T.A. Dorgan. What animals appear in pictures by T.A. Dorgan? Mr. Kieran again.
Dogs.
Dogs, yes. Who was T.A.
Tad,
Dorgan?
the famous cartoonist.
The old-time funny strip artist. That gives us 3 out of 3, gentlemen. And that, I think, gives us a very good record for the second half of the program. And now I hope that Mr. Kieran and Mr. Adams, as regulars, will forgive us for mentioning another kind of experts who are even harder to stump. Tell them who, Mr. Cross.
They're the tobacco experts, gentlemen. And the reason they're so hard to stump on the subject of smoking is because it's their bread and butter business to know just who buys what tobacco at the auctions. Yes, and the prices paid. Now, suppose you cornered Mr. Tobacco Expert and asked him this question. What cigarette do you smoke? Here's the answer you might get. Every year I follow the tobacco auctions from Georgia through the Carolinas to Kentucky. And every year I see Lucky Strike pay the price to get finer, lighter, naturally milder tobaccos. Can't you guess what cigarette I smoke? Well, to save guessing, here are the facts. Sworn records show that twice as many independent tobacco experts, auctioneers, buyers, and warehousemen smoke Lucky's exclusively as smoke all other cigarettes combined. That fact will keep you from being stumped if you want the natural mildness of finer, lighter tobaccos. Ask for the tobacco expert cigarette, Lucky Strike. With men who know tobacco best, it's Lucky's 2-to-1.
Thank you, Mr. Cross. Lucky Strike announces rewards totaling $50 and 2 sets of the Britannica. Thank you, Judge Wallace. Thank you, Mr. Simpson, for helping us out this evening. Now, next week, the old reliable trio will be back in full force. Kieran, Adams, and Levant. And our guest of honor will be the distinguished and well-known American playwright, Owen Davis, whose mystery play, Mr. and Mrs. North, opens soon. Now, remember, listeners, for every question we use, whether or not it's answered correctly, the sender gets $10. If the question should stump our experts, you not only get $25 more, but in addition, the complete 24-volume set of the latest edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica. Send your letters with questions and correct answers to Information, please, 480 Lexington Avenue, New York City. And now, a parting message from Mr. L.A. Speed Riggs, the famous tobacco auctioneer of Goldsboro, North Carolina.
And that chant, fully interpreted, ladies and gentlemen, means Lucky's pay higher prices for the finer, the lighter, the naturally milder tobaccos. With independent tobacco experts, auctioneers, buyers, warehousemen, with men who know tobacco best, it's Lucky's 2-to-1.